we're going to spend some time with two of my favorite people. It is always said that it is a blessing to be able to find something one really loves in life, something that one has a passion for. But to be able to do that to the extent and to the commitment and success that Ruben Uriarte and Noe Torres have done is extraordinary. They get to do and live their passion, and boy, do they do it right. They've got a brand new book out. What they do is find little-known stories from the UFO nomenclature, from the many, many stories that people never hear about, and take that story and run with it. And they research it, and they write a book about it, and they get to come on this program, and I get to have them on this program to talk about it. And they've got a great story in their new book, and I want to welcome back first Noe Torres. Ruben will join us in just a few minutes. Are you there, Noe?
Yes, I am, Jeff. I'm so glad to be on your show again. Thank you for inviting me and inviting Ruben tonight.
Oh, of course. And all of you who are able to, please go online, look in the guest box, and click on the phrase right under Noe Torres' name. It's the Cisco Grove UFO Encounter, right under Noe's name. And you'll go to a page that shows Ruben and Noe together, and then the cover of the book, and then some drawings, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later tonight, made by the man involved with this story. It is a whale of a story. How do you guys find such utterly fascinating stories and get to spend the time to do it? I mean, you really do get into these things and you make them come alive.
Well, Jeff, interestingly enough, the stories that we've turned into books have all been UFO stories that Ruben and I have run across in our own personal experience. That we have known something of what had happened. It happened close to our geographical area where we live. We had a connection to each of these stories.
Okay. Noe, why don't you go ahead and start, and then we'll move to Ruben, who was... or do you want to start with Ruben? Because Ruben was right there and stayed with the man involved. And
I'll go ahead and start, and then Ruben can go back and fill in some of the details
Perfect.
later on.
All right, perfect. The guy's name is Donald Shrum, and as you say in your press release, he faced his own personal war of the worlds in the forest. Go ahead.
That's exactly right. And one of the things that I wanted to start off by saying is that the one book that has impacted me in my life more than any others in terms of UFO research is a book that I read in the 1960s called The Interrupted Journey by John Fuller. And it was the story of the abduction of Barney and Betty Hill, in New Hampshire in 1961.
Right.
Probably the most fascinating, even in our day today, probably the most fascinating story of a UFO abduction case, in all history. And over the years, when I myself became inspired to spend a lot of time researching UFOs and reading the literature and so forth, and eventually linked up with Ruben, and we started doing our own research and doing our own books. And I had the honor of meeting Kathleen Marden, who is the niece of Betty Hill, and was able to spend some time with her at Roswell during one of the UFO festivals that we were both speaking at. And so it remains to me a very amazing story. And the way this ties into the case that we're going to talk about tonight is that, the Barney and Betty Hill abduction case happened in 1961, and the Donald Shrum case that we're going to talk about happened almost exactly 3 years later, in September of 1964. And, there were three major cases that Dr. J. Allen Hynek, one of the world's foremost astronomers and UFO investigators of the 1960s,
right.
There were three cases that he held in very high regard in terms of their credibility, and one of them was the Barney and Betty Hill case, which he himself investigated along with numerous other people, including Dr. James Harder, another prominent UFO researcher of that time period. The second case that Hynek and Harder investigated and that they both held in very high esteem was the Pascagoula, Mississippi UFO abduction case involving Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker.
Hickson just passed on, I think, recently.
Right, recently, a few months ago, Charles Hickson, the central eyewitness in the Pascagoula case, passed away, unfortunately. And the third case that both Hynek and Harder looked at, and they were very highly impressed by the high credibility of it, was the Don Shrum Cisco Grove UFO encounter of September 1964 that we're going to talk about tonight. So this is a significant case in terms of UFO history, and it's a case that not many people have heard a lot about, and I'll explain why that is, but it certainly is one of the top and most interesting and very, very intriguing cases of the 1960s. And while this is not an actual abduction per se, it was a near abduction. And as you said in the introduction to this, Mr. Don Shrum was hunting for deer, bow and arrow hunting for deer in this dark forest in Northern California when he encountered these ETs and these UFOs. And he had a struggle. He had a 12-hour struggle, basically, for his existence to keep from being taken, as we're going to see as the story unfolds, that the beings were obviously after him and were attempting to get to him. And so he had his own personal war of the worlds that evening. So we can start the story, Jeff, if we've got... we have a space here without any break. Yeah,
we have a break coming up in just about a minute. Let me just do a little bit more here, background-wise. Now, Donald Shrum was out with a bow and arrow, trying to bring down deer. That's not easy in and of itself. It's not my favorite. Hunting is not my thing, but a good archery hunter is a very skilled individual. Now, he was up there in this dark forest alone with his bow and arrow, and apparently wearing camo fatigues or whatever deer hunters wear, so they blend into the surrounding countryside. Now, you folks can see some pictures of this as well. What's fascinating to me is the description of the craft, but more so his description and his drawings of the ETs, the extraterrestrials themselves. It appears that this was a race or a species that I have not seen depicted in drawings before. They had helmets and suits, very unusual looking, rather frightening looking. Obviously, Donald Shrum was frightened. And one of them, Shrum, actually, well, we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. We got our break coming up right now. Let me remind you can get this book by Ruben and Noe at RoswellBooks.com. And I hope all of you will get yourself a copy and rediscover the lost art of reading. And these guys know how to tell a story, a great story, especially when it's from an eyewitness. When Ruben, did you spend this time with Donald Shrum? And is he still with us? I guess he is.
Yes, he's still alive. I had the privilege of meeting him and his family in September of 2005. They invited me to their home, and I had a chance to stay with them for about 2 days. And in that time, I was really awestruck by not only his down-to-earth manner, but the fact that his story was consistent after 41 years when he first shared the story with the previous investigator, Mr. Paul Cerny, who was with NICAP at that time. And I was very fortunate to acquire his files. Paul Cerny later joined MUFON. He was the Northern California State MUFON Director. And then later he was promoted to Western Regional Director. But he passed away about in 2000, in November of 2000. And through that, I was able to acquire his cases. And when I first started to look at his notes, and I said, my God, this is so weird, so unusual.
Yeah.
And the fact that I just said, I would love to meet this man someday. So through synchronicity, through some other people, I was able to meet him.
Wow,
and
very
then,
good.
We were very, very fortunate to hook up with Noe, but we were able to put it into a book form.
Okay, hold on right there, gentlemen. We'll pause and come back and get into the story a little bit here and tell you what happened to Donald Shrum in the Tahoe forest in 1964. Okay, and back with Noe and Ruben. All right, let's get into the story a little bit more. Whoever wants to go first, step right up.
Jeff, well, this remarkable story began, as we've already mentioned, when Don Shrum, who, interestingly enough, was actually working for a missile defense contractor for the U.S. government. He was a welder and a painter of missiles, including the Polaris, the Titan missile, and a number of other defense weaponry of the early 1960s. So he was in a very sensitive defense contractor position there in the Sacramento, California area. He worked for the Aerojet Corporation at that time. And as we're going to find out as the story develops, that was the main reason that he could not reveal his identity. And that's why there was a hesitation. This story did not come out to its full extent back in the 60s. He was very, very concerned because of his employer being a major, the major missile builder for the U.S. military at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So he and two buddies from work, also welders and painters, went hunting over the weekend, actually beginning on a Friday in September of 1964. They went hunting at the Tahoe National Forest, which is east of Sacramento, and the three men had been hunting together a handful of times before, and this was before the start of the rifle hunting season, so they were, occasionally would go bow and arrow hunting. So this was a bow and arrow session that started early on Friday, September 4th, and they hunted throughout the day, and it was getting near sundown when the three men actually took separate routes and became separated from each other. Mr. Shrum was up on the side of a ravine. And there was another gentleman that was on the other side of the ravine, and then the third gentleman was down below. And Mr. Shrum thought that when he walked to the end of that ravine, that there would be a way for him to cross over and rejoin his companion on the other side, but it turned out there was no way for him to cross. And so he had to backtrack to try to make it back to camp, which was a couple of miles away from where he ended up. Well, by this time it was getting significantly dark. This was an area that he was mostly unfamiliar with. He hadn't actually been out to the specific place. It was very rocky, hilly, with ravines, canyons, hills. And he had read prior to going hunting that there had been a lot of bear activity in that area. Bears had been sighted. Some of the hunters reported that running across bears in that area, so he was worried about that.
Yeah.
So a common strategy that hunters have when they're separated from their colleagues during a hunting expedition, and they're not able to get back to camp, what they do is they seek a safe place where they can hide for the night. And so what Mr. Shrum decided to do was find a tree that he could climb where he could spend the night. He didn't want to go tramping around the forest, and hurt himself or fall down a ravine, twist an ankle, break a leg. He didn't want to have any encounters with bears or other predators. So, people often ask Ruben and me, why would he climb a tree? Well, it's actually a strategy that hunters use in cases like this in order to avoid, being attacked. So anyway, his decision was to spend the night in this tree. And I don't know if we have the audio clips, Jeff. Do you know if we have those ready?
I'm not sure.
An audio clip he was up in the tree when he first saw this mothership appear coming toward him. That's clip 150, the appearance of the mothership.
We'll check with the network and find out. I don't remember actually seeing them. Did you email them to me? In what form?
Yes, they were MP3 audio clips, but if you don't have them, we can just go ahead and just tell the story.
No, I can play them right here. I'll just need to find them. Did you send them to me, or did Ruben?
I sent them to you, yes. All
right, I will find them.
Okay, sure.
Carry on. Yeah.
So he was on top of this tree, been separated from his buddies, and then all of a sudden he sees a light off in the distance. It's coming at the horizon.
Excuse me, 1 second, Noe. What's amazing is somebody, I don't know, going up in a tree and going to sleep in a tree, I guess you wouldn't want to roll over while you were asleep.
Right.
Would you?
He had, what he did was, his tactic was to hitch himself. He had a belt, a military-style belt, and he hitched himself to one of the large branches up there.
Very good. Okay, I got it.
And he also used this large wooden, 60-pound wooden recurve bow that he used. He used it as kind of a platform between the branches below him.
Oh, smart.
And he made himself a little perch up there. So he was up there in the tree when he noticed this bright light coming toward him. And his first thought was that his buddies had contacted the local forest rangers
search and rescue.
Told them that that their buddy was lost,
and
that the Forest Service had sent a helicopter.
But it turned out not exactly to be.
As the object grew closer, it became very apparent to Mr. Shrum that this was not a helicopter, because first of all, it was making absolutely no noise whatsoever. There was no sound, and also the object was moving very strangely, very erratically, not like a helicopter would. And also, the full size of it revealed itself to him, it was a much, much larger size than any helicopter would have been. In fact, in his descriptions that he gave in the case materials and during the interviews with us, he described it as being approximately 150 feet in diameter. So that would be like a 14-story building turned on its side, cigar-shaped, dark metallic hull. And
that's huge. That's gigantic.
Yeah, that's huge.
He must have been absolutely petrified, overwhelmed with his sensory, what he was seeing, amazed.
Right. Here was a gentleman who worked with missile defense systems, who was familiar with the missiles of the day and the aircraft of the day, working for a government missile contractor. And he knew that this technology that was approaching him, that was then, it came to a stationary position near him, hovering over a canyon. He knew that this was nothing that was man-made.
He knew it wasn't a Polaris missile. I got it.
Absolutely not.
I got it. Okay. Now, I've found that email, just FYI, and I've tried to open it several times. It's a zip file, and it doesn't want to open. If you have that on your computer, you can play it right into your into the telephone, and it'll work. Or you can send me.
We can probably set that up during a break, maybe.
Yeah, we got a break coming up here in just a couple minutes. Or if you want to send me the individual files, that'll work. I'm not.
Yeah, I can certainly do that.
Go ahead and fire away here. Actually, they're loading right now, slowly. So we'll get to them probably after the top of the hour, because I do want to hear these. I've got 3 files. Did you send me 3?
There's actually about 10 or 12 of those. But
okay. All right.
However many you can get out of there.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Okay, very good.
So he sees this light, which then turns out to be this huge object.
Now, the object there's a drawing of it that we can see.
Yes.
It's oblong, and it's got round, I guess you could call them, who knows if they're windows or not, but there are round things on the side of it.
Mr. Shrum referred to them as portals. or windows.
So that would suggest he could see in.
The reason he called them portals is because out of the middle one of these three portals came this smaller craft, which we refer to as the scout ship. And so this huge ship was we referred to it as the mother ship, and then the smaller ship that came out of one of the portals was the actual vessel in which all of the beings, or out of which all of the beings came later on when he encountered the creatures that came after him.
Now, the picture, I'm looking at it right now, and if you click under Ruben and Noe's names and guests, you'll pull the page up with the picture. It looks like a cigar, so to speak. Appears to be rounded on the ends. The three portals on the side are rectangular, but arranged vertically, not horizontally. Is this drawing, I guess it probably took Donald a long time to do it, or did someone else do this?
This excellent sketch was done completely 100% based on Mr. Shrum's description and earlier sketches, which are in the book, so you can compare. Mr. Shrum does not have the artistic skill to render, a beautiful sketch like this. So my friend Neil Reeve did the illustrations, but 100% based on Mr. Shrum's description and his own sketches.
Now, if that is a 14-story object on its side, horizontal to the ground,
yes,
that is enormous. 140, 150 feet from end to end, something like that. And the craft that came out could easily be 25 feet in diameter, it looks like.
That's exactly what Mr. Shrum felt, that the scout ship, which was dome-shaped, was approximately 20 feet wide and 30 feet tall.
Wow.
And all of the beings that he encountered later in the evening came out of this smaller ship, although he got the strong sense that there were other beings aboard the mothership directing the activities of these creatures that gathered around at the base of the tree where Mr. Shrum was attempting to hide.
So he's up in a tree trying to sleep, and then all of a sudden he's up in a tree in fear of his life trying to hide. Like,
that's correct. Don't
move a muscle kind of thing. Wow. Hold on a second. We'll take a break and come back with Ruben and Noe in just a couple minutes. Okay, and we're back with Ruben Uriarte and Noe Torres. It's an amazing story about Donald Shrum, separated from his two hunting companions, found a tree to climb up in to get himself at least reasonably comfortable to try to sleep, and then saw a large, as in 14-story tall, craft, not from here. An enormous ship came down and hovered pretty much horizontal to the ground above the trees, and out the side of it came a 20 foot in diameter, 25 foot tall, disc-shaped craft, and from there it gets really weird. Now, Noe was kind enough to send me the first audio clip here, so if you'd like, Noe and Ruben, I'll go ahead and play this right now.
Yes, absolutely. This is the one where he talks about going up in the tree and then the first contact with the UFO.
Very good. Okay. Here we go. Let's see how we do.
We getting ready for the evening hunt, and I went down one ridge, and this one friend of mine went down the canyon bottom, and the other went down the other ridge. And when we got to the end of the ridge, it was just a sheer drop off where I was, so I had to backtrack and go down and around the other side of the ridge. And by the time I got to the bottom, it was pitch black. And so I stumbled through the brush. I couldn't see nothing. It was just dark. Before the moon comes up, it gets really dark in the mountains. And I like I said, I crashed through the brush and stuff, and then I could see the moon was starting up, and I saw a big granite cliff with a crack that went up the side, and the crack was about a foot wide, so I was able to walk up there, and there was a tree right at the edge when I got up there, so I figured there's a lot of bear in the area, so I figured I'd spend the night in the tree. The base of the tree to the first limb was about 12 feet, but from the rock it was only about 7 feet. I could reach up and hand walk out to the trunk of the tree, and then pull myself up, and anyway, there was two limbs come out on an angle, and then there was one that I sit on, and then I put my foot on the other one, and so I was figuring on spending the night up there.
How far away was the tree to the campsite, approximately? Did you estimate?
It was probably close to a mile, maybe 3/4.
So your campsite wasn't really that far away then? Huh?
No,
But yet, because of the terrain and
yeah, I was over a mountain from that, so I couldn't see the campfire.
Okay, very good. Clear voice. Obviously, you just, as you are both such superb investigators, and many of you listening, I've heard these things for years on the program, you can hear the ring of truth in somebody's voice. We don't even have to go there. The man is telling us what he experienced. Okay, that was a superb clip. Go ahead. We've got a bunch more clips here. So
the important thing here, Jeff, is as you mentioned, this gentleman has absolutely no reason to seek publicity of any kind. In fact, he requested that his identity be withheld. It's only been with the release of this book. Now, he's in his 70s and not in good health, unfortunately. And he has come to a point in his life where he feels that this story needs to be told in its entirety. All previous iterations of this story, the ones that were printed in the 60s and 70s, never included his true identity or the identity of his fellow hunters. So for the first time, as I say, he now wants the entire story told. Because he worked for Aerojet, one of the nation's leading defense contractors in the 60s, he was very hesitant to come out with this information until now. In the second clip, clip number 2, Jeff, he tells the amazing first view of this massive mothership. And at first he could only see what looked like a small light. It ended up being just kind of a headlight at the front end of this massive object.
All right.
And he thought that was the entire UFO, this small light. But then as it came into view, he realized it was just a tiny part of it.
Wow. All right. Well, a man of his background, knowing missiles, must have been doubly amazed. All right, here we go. Here's the second clip.
And then I saw a light. It looked like a lantern going up and down a trail. But then it came over the top of a tree, and I got kind of excited then because I thought it was a helicopter from the Forest Service. And I stood between two of the fires that I built on the rocks and waved my arms and yelled and screamed, and finally that light started coming towards me. So I was really relieved then because I thought it was a helicopter still. Until it got within, maybe 60 feet or yards. I'm not sure the distance at night. But it just hovered there with no sound. So then I panicked because I knew it was no helicopter. I thought it was something from outer space. But it looked like all I could see is a little, about an 8-inch glow. So I thought it was just a little tiny, flying saucer. And then I kind of panicked, and I threw my bow up in the tree again and hand walked out that limb and got up in the tree. And I had all camouflage clothing on, so I figured, well, they won't see me here, But then this light went a half circle around me over the canyon, and I could see the shadow of the whole spacecraft, and that was just a light that was on the nose of it.
Wow, he must have been beyond words. I mean, that's just an incredible clip.
One other key point also we need to make, Jeff, is that one of his hunting buddies, Vincent Alvarez, later filed a written notarized affidavit that he also witnessed the entry of the arrival of the mothership down from the Earth's atmosphere. He gave a description of having seen it. Although he was physically, removed by maybe a mile or two from Mr. Shrum's position, he witnessed this object coming down out of the Earth's atmosphere, and he saw it streaking across toward the position where Mr. Shrum was, up in the tree.
It came in pretty fast.
Came in low and fast, yes, and it was upon Mr. Shrum, as you could tell in that audio clip, the surprise and the horror of seeing that object come around, swing around, and then just hover a short distance away from his tree.
Right, okay. We're going to go right through the commercials here, and I want to get all this in. Let's go into the third audio clip now. And are we ready for that?
Yeah, that's where he sees the smaller ship coming out from that middle lighted panel.
Very good.
Panels of light, and then I saw 3 panels of light, like windows or whatever, and I saw a flash come from the bottom of the center one, and just saw a dark object go down in the canyon, and then I lost track of it. And then the next thing I saw a little blinking light up on the top of originally where the first one came from.
This object that you first saw that left the center panel, what did it look like, Tom?
Well, at that time, all I saw was a flash and saw a dark object go down.
The dark object, what shape was it?
Well, I couldn't really say. It went so fast. But then I saw when it landed up on the ridge that it I could see like a half. I could only see part of the top, but it had a little light on it, and looked like the top of a flying saucer that I'd seen in pictures.
Like a dome? Or
yes.
Was it
yeah, like a dome. And then I kept my eyes on that.
Okay, very good. More and more interesting. Ruben, are you there?
Yes, I just arrived and I'm home.
Good. We've been playing audio clips, and they're fascinating. Mr. Shrum has a very good voice and speaks very clearly about what he saw, and no doubt about that at all. You were the one who interviewed him, and what was your impression of him beside the obvious that he is telling the truth? He's a man who realized he had something, it seems to me, very, very special, and he did not want it lost from the public.
Exactly. The thing that just struck me every time I hear the audio tapes, and we also have a video of his interview, But the thing that really struck me was how his body language, how this event still bothers him quite a bit. And there was at one point where I felt like we needed to pause and divert because I could tell that it was really getting to him. But the thing that amazed me also was his detail, the clarity, and then I just began reminiscing what it must have been for Paul Cerny, who heard this story 41 years ago when he first investigated the case, and the fact that Don never lost a step. He just always stuck to the same descriptions. He may have added a little bit more, but it was his body language. Also, like what you had mentioned earlier, Jeff, about how you could tell in his voice. I said, this man, in my thoughts, is what was it like to see these beings? And the fact that he had showed me a canteen that he had, when we get later into the story, where he's battling with these guys and he's throwing things at them, and one was a canteen. And he showed me the canteen that was actually picked up by one of the beings.
Oh, wow. Oh.
And then he threw it back, and then the being threw it back on the ground, and then I held that canteen, and I said, gee, this is really interesting. I'm holding something that was touched by another being from another world.
That's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
And the fact, like you mentioned earlier, we had discussed it, was his personal war of the worlds. And as we get later into the story, he used his bow and arrow, and he used his matches. He used fire. He used
Wow. This sounds like a major motion picture. Hold on, let's go ahead and listen to the next clip. Noah, you want to set this up?
Yeah, this is fascinating because at this point he was dressed all in camouflage. He was up in a tree, in the foliage of the tree, and he was thinking that he might be able to get away without having any negative contact with these creatures, if and when the creatures did show up that were in these craft. But as it turned out, within a short period of time, there arrived on the scene some very strange creatures, which he's going to describe in this audio.
All right, here we go.
And I heard some thrashing through the brush, and probably 5-10 minutes, these two humanoids come out of the brush, and they kind of broke some of the brush off and was looking at it. And then they came straight underneath the tree and looked up at me, and I knew right then I was fingered.
They found you.
Yeah, they found me.
Can you describe them for us? That was briefly what they
Yeah, they looked like 4 or 5 feet. Of course, I'm looking down at them, so they'd be shorter than they probably are. And they had a silvery, like a one-piece suit on, and it seemed like it had the joints, puffy joints, on the shoulders and the elbows, and the legs I didn't see that clear.
The humanoids, were you able to see their faces?
No, it was just a kind of a dark shadow. I could see the two like eyes that were looked like welding goggles to me. They're the same as welding goggles, and then the rest of the face was kind of blur. I couldn't see looking down at them.
You're able to see then was it large or small? They're
about 2 inches in diameter. It reminded me, just like I said, like a welding goggles.
Well, maybe they were welding goggles. We don't know. This is wild. I can't even believe what this guy is going through. Now, he's probably waiting for them to shoot him with a ray gun or something at this point. He's got his bow and arrow up there. All right, we're going to hear a lot more here. We're going to keep playing these clips because they're just extraordinary. We're up to number 5 next. You want to set this one up, Noe?
Yeah, and before we do, I just want to quickly mention that on your website, on Rense.com, for tonight's show, the Cisco Grove page, they'll see a picture of those 2 humanoids clearing the brush. Excellent artwork done by Neil Reeve, again, based on Shrum's description. And it just gives you an eerie feeling to look at that.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking at them right now. It appears that they had masks on or helmets.
He wasn't sure if the headpiece was some kind of hood or some kind of helmet. And, so he was uncertain about that, but the general appearance is just as pictured in it.
Now, the other beings and the 2 beings in the picture appear not to have a mask on, just a hood, a shroud over their heads.
That's correct.
And they don't...
Now, the oddest thing yet is, in addition to these 2 humanoids, a distinctly different-looking creature appears next, which there's a sketch of above the picture of the humanoids. There's a sketch of this robot-like that appeared next. And we're going to hear that in this next clip.
All right. Well, that robot has apparently very human-like hands. It looks like a thumb, an opposing thumb, and 4 fingers, and wild. All right. Let's hear Donald Shrum again. And studio, we're going to go right through this break too. I want to make sure we get all this in tonight. So here we go.
And then I saw 2 flashing red orange light eyes just picking its way down the ridge, just between the rocks and around them and everything, and come down and was on this big boulder, this big flat rock, and then he kind of looked up at me, and he moved his hand in this through the fires, cinders, and kind of scattered them.
And the eyes of this other creature, like the...
Well, stop there just a second. So, in other words, the creature apparently bent over, and one of the fires that Donald had set, he just kind of scattered the embers, right?
Yes. And
okay.
This actually was kind of significant, as we'll find out later in the story, because from that action on the part of this robot-like creature, Shrum surmised that perhaps they were a bit scared of fire, like for instance, he was trying to put out the embers. That seemed to be, or at least that's what Shrum got out of it.
Okay, back to the audio clip here.
Robot, what did that look like to you?
It had kind of like fire. It's kind of a orangish, reddish orange, or yellowish orange, and it kind of flickered like fire. And they're about the same diameter as about 2 inches in diameter as the humanoids.
So the eyes of this robot kind of flickered in a fiery way. That's really weird.
Yes. It's something that he actually, for a long time after this encounter, he suffered from what we would call today
PTSD,
post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And he would wake up screaming at night, remembering the eyes of these creatures. And as I was telling Ruben, I recently had the privilege to spend some time with Travis Walton, probably the world's most famous UFO abductee.
Yeah.
And Travis, in describing his experience of being abducted and kept aboard a UFO for a week, he used the exact same phrase that we had heard Don Shrum say. He said those eyes, that they really disturbed him, and that he carried the feeling that those eyes were penetrating, to his very brain. So that's certainly a similar thing. That's what happened to Shrum.
All right. Here's our next clip. Are you there with us, Ruben?
Yes, I am.
Okay, very good. Excellent interview, Ruben, by the way. Superb.
Oh, thank you.
All right, here we go.
So I had a 60-pound bow, which is a very high velocity, and I shot. Seeing as how the robot is the only thing that was causing me harm, I shot the chest area, and it has the velocity of a rifle at that distance, because I'm only about 7-8 feet from him. And when I hit the chest, the sparks would fly like like an arc welder kind of. And then that robot backed up and almost knocked him down. He kind of fell back against the rock, and the two at the bottom took off and headed for the brush and stood out there about 30 feet from me. And then I shot 2 more arrows, and it was about the same time sequence that these 2 humanoids would, every time I'd shoot, they'd go back up into the brush, just almost out of sight from me.
Was he shooting always at the robot creature?
Yeah, there was a clip in there, Jeff, that we missed, in which he's talking about when the robot first arrived, and it came right up to the base of the tree, and then it reached up with one of its hands up to its mouth, and out of its mouth bellowed this huge puff of vapor, white vapor, which caused Mr. Shrum to not be able to breathe. It took the oxygen out of the air from around him, and it actually caused him to black out for a few moments. And so this robot then was attempting to knock him out of the tree. It was his opinion of what was going on, and that happened several times. And so it was at that point that Mr. Shrum decided that he was going to take the offensive, and he began firing at that robot. And he says in the clip that we just heard that because the robot was the only one that was doing him harm, that's why he targeted his arrows at the robot. And the humans, he felt the humanoids would have been much more severely affected by the arrows. It most likely would have penetrated their spacesuits, but this creature, he felt that the humanoids hadn't taken any aggressive action toward him, whereas this robot-like creature had, and so that's why he targeted him.
That's remarkable. He was that cool-headed that he could make that kind of a value decision, almost a moral decision, in that kind of a circumstance.
Yeah, it was a very impressive decision.
Well, the bottom illustration before the pictures of Donald Shrum show the hunted up in the tree and the hunter below him or whatever, and 2 plumes coming out of his helmet, out of his ears. This is really weird, very weird. Very weird.
I don't think anybody could have made a story up like this.
No, it's too strange.
He's just describing things that he saw, that he's describing them in very common sense terms. It's just like someone that's witnessing an incredible event and just grasping for words to describe what's going on, because there was no earthly context for what was going on here. This was just strange behavior by these beings.
Well, I don't know. This is another one that is just completely over the top. I've never heard anything like it. All right, let's go on to the next clip. You want to say anything in here, Ruben?
Which one are we at now?
We're coming up to where he's run out of arrows.
Yes. What's very fascinating is the fact that, and we'll hear it, I think it's probably clip 450, where he, after shooting his arrows, He used fire and he used coins. He was very resourceful. He started breaking branches. He started using his hat. He burned his hat. Anything to throw at these guys. And,
all right.
And so we can get right into that.
All right. Here we go.
Then I ran out of arrows, so I only had 3 left. And I thought, well, that's when pomade hair, it just, I mean, the cap I had on was just soaked with oil.
Is this for your hair?
Yeah, from my hair, yeah, pomade. And I always carried all kinds of books of matches with me when I hunted. And so I lit that cap and it just blazed up, and I dropped it down the base of the tree. And just in that instant, they moved back about 12, 15 feet, and I glanced over at the ship that was over the canyon, kind of almost level with me, and it was almost out of sight. It was just like a star. It moved that fast.
Wow.
Just in that second. So then I got the idea that they're scared of fire. So I burned everything but my T-shirt and my jeans, and come to find out later on that it was 32 degrees out, and I was shaking and kind of overexposed for the weather. And at one time I had a bunch of change, and I threw it down, and they all kind of gathered around it. Well, after I shot or started burning stuff and throwing it down, and I even tied some of my shirt that I ripped up to a compass so I could try to hit some brush, because there wasn't nothing right underneath the tree. And I caught a little pile of brush on fire. I figured that would bring the cavalry. That when I run out of stuff to burn, I headed for the top of the tree, and then it was a pretty sparse tree. I could see down to the ground, and I broke off the top and threw it down. And anytime I throw down or shake the tree, these humanoids would back up.
This is just amazing. We've got 4 more clips to go. I want to make sure we get them all in. But briefly, obviously we're not hearing anything about telepathy or incapacitating beams of light. These are seemingly, obviously advanced, but at the level of encounter, it's a rather a primitive encounter.
This is a very interesting thought, and Donald Shrum has thought about this a lot over the years. His thought is that they were not planning to run across any human being. So his happening to be there at that time may have just been a coincidence that they were unprepared for. They were. He noticed that they were kind of looking at all the vegetation and breaking off little samples of it and stuff.
Right.
So perhaps their mission was such that they were not really completely prepared for dealing with.
Sounds like it to me. I mean, they're out in the middle of nowhere. What do they expect? Not to find humans, I would think. That's very interesting.
Now, the other interesting thing, Jeff, is that, people tell us that if we were ever to be invaded by technologically advanced aliens, that probably our best recourse would be to go to a low-tech method of fighting back.
Depending upon the advanced state of the aliens themselves. Yeah, in some cases that might work beautifully.
Exactly, but see, we could not combat their technology, and there's been many instances where during UFO encounters, weapons and engines and all sorts of human electrical and mechanical things don't
Shut right down,
But
yeah.
Shrum didn't have access to any of this. He had the most basic of weaponry. He had nothing mechanical, nothing electrical, nothing that they could tamper with.
Well, all right. Very good. Let's go to the next clip. Clip number 9, and listen in.
After I went to the top of the tree, I had a military belt, and I moved it out to the last hitch and put it around me and the tree.
Now remember, this is all happening when this Donald Shrum is up in the tree. All right.
So in case I did get gassed, I wouldn't fall down. And then, like I said, I threw change down and everything to try to distract them. And then finally, these two humanoids stepped back from the tree, and another robot came, and there was two, just about the same place that the two humanoids were, and they stood facing each other, and flames, just like lightning, and it real bright, and just came between them. And then the gas was so thick coming up the tree that it would dissipate just about the time I got to me. But then that's when I'd start gas for air, and then when I woke up from that, it was light, but the sun hadn't come up yet, and I was just hanging by my belt, my head down, my feet down, and they were gone. Well, I knew I made it. I lived through the night.
Just to go back, did you fall asleep, or this gas, did it overwhelm you?
Yeah, that's when it completely engulfed the whole tree and got up to me, and I don't know how long I was out, but it was just you could see just a dim glow of the sun on the clouds and stuff, not clouds, but in the sky. And then when I woke up, it was light, but the sun hadn't come up yet.
So they actually succeeded they brought another robot in and doubled the amount of gas that they let go. It went up the tree and knocked him out. He was so smart to have tied himself to that tree, or who knows what might have occurred. This is amazing. Now, hindsight is beautiful, and if you, Noe, or you, Reuben, were up in that tree, and these creatures, these beings, these intelligent life forms, clearly had acted as they had. The guy throws change from his pocket down there, and they back up. He throws fire down there, and they back up. I mean, at that point, I think the picture of him shows him holding a little girl, married, probably had a family. But let's say the average person who was alone, living by himself, somebody might have climbed down there and just stood looking at them. I mean, they obviously could have done more to harm him, I would think, unless they were completely unarmed and all they had was some robots with gas in their heads. So I don't know.
Well, the strongest perception that he received from them is that they wanted to collect him as a specimen, and he was deathly afraid that he would be removed forever from his child and his young child that's shown in that picture with him.
So he did get, okay, there was apparently, at least in his mind, some kind of telepathic messaging or communication going on, or they were allowing him to read their intention. that he was
Yes.
to get put in a bottle of formaldehyde and taken back to the planet the star system Alpha Centauri.
He was aware, by the way, and we hadn't mentioned this completely earlier, but there was a lot of communication going on during this encounter. There would be flashes of light from the mothership, which would when these occurred, along with strange noises that sounded like a bird cooing or perhaps an owl hooting. And any time that these noises would occur, or that these flashes of light would occur, the creatures would change their behavior. For example, he noticed that after a set of these signals, the humanoids then started to attempt to climb the tree. And so there was communication going on between all of the mothership and the creatures and the robots. And meanwhile, as you mentioned a while ago, he had this strong, pervasive sense that they were after him to collect him as a specimen to do experiments on.
This is wild. It could have been dissected then in 100,000 pieces and still in bottles somewhere else in the other part of the galaxy. Okay, let's listen to another one. This is an incredible story.
When I got down to the limb that I first came up on, one of the flyers caught a piece of brush and kind of loomed up, and I thought, oh no, they're invisible. So I sat up in the tree for a long time until, the sun still hadn't came up yet. And I got down and I found my compass and no coins. The coins were gone, and my canteen. And when I after my hat, I threw my canteen down, and they picked it up and looked at it and threw it back down. I guess it wasn't. But then somebody told me on the coins that it gets dates, it gets pictures, so maybe that was the reason they were, that they got most of the coins.
So you didn't find any?
No, but I knew which way I shot the arrow and which way it would arc, so I found 2 of them, and then tried to make my way back to camp. And I got almost to camp, and I just kind of fatigued and everything. I just laid down, and I heard my hunting buddy, whistling, and I yelled at him, and he come pick me up and help me to camp.
Then what?
Well, I slept for about 6 hours because I'd been up all night, and then they didn't bug me until I woke up. Then I told them more of the story.
What was their reaction?
Well, they believed me because they saw the condition I was in, and matter of fact, it almost ruined their hunting season because every time it get dark and the noise, at least little noise in the woods, they'd panic, and so it affected a lot of people. And then,
now, what I want to do here is go right on to the next one, make sure we get this in, and it's just amazing to hear this man tell this story. He's got the 2 arrows, I would think, too, right?
Yeah, they were analyzed in the 60s, so we can talk more about that later. But
okay.
yes, he kept the specimen.
Very good.
Then what happened afterwards, Don? How did you talk to anyone else about your...
Well, my family, I told them. And then the only outside person at that time was a professor at one of the colleges. and my mother-in-law had gone. It was her professor when she was younger, so we told him the story, and he's the one that contacted the Air Force.
So what happened there, John, with the Air Force?
Well, they made an appointment with two posted representatives of the Air Force, and they tried to disillusion me. They said, well, you know, the Japanese might have had somebody up there, you know, they were still, you know, and they said it was Boy Scouts dressed up, you know, in costumes just to scare somebody. And I said, yeah, I'm sure they're going to spend all night and keep a guy in a tree, you know. And, then they said the Army probably bivouacked up there and it was in a training camp. So my father-in-law was in the Air Force. So he called and found out there was no military in that area for any reason, because it was a pretty desolate area. And they tried to disillusion me in every way they could. And they took the Arrowhead, the main one, and they said, well, we'll get back to you and you can have this back as soon as we get through with it, which I never did. But when I went back up there during rifle season, I found the other arrow, the third one.
You found two then, and then you found the other one.
And when we went back, the area had been raked. There's an area probably 50 feet around that tree, and there was cigarette packages and cigar butts, and so I know the Air Force checked it out pretty good.
Yeah, explain.
And they had an easy way to find it, because there's an orange circle around that tree where it had caught little fires.
Oh, right.
And it was showing orange, so they had no problem finding it. And I marked on the map that they had where it was, the location.
We've got one more audio clip. We have about 6-7 minutes left. Do you want to play the audio clip or just wrap it up with discussion here?
Yeah, we can just wrap up, because the final clip just talks about the tremendous trouble that he had getting over what happened to him that night.
Uh-huh.
He suffered for many years with horrible nightmares.
Oh, yeah.
He would wake up in a cold sweat, and he would say, those eyes, those eyes. He kept repeating that expression, referring to the strange dark eyes of the humanoids, he had seen on the humanoids. But the interesting part about the clip we just played there was that, he had come down off that tree. He had been reunited with his buddies, and then he talked about the Air Force involvement. And the Air Force was, the funny thing is that the Air Force spent all this time trying to convince him that what he saw was not what he really saw. And they came up with these bizarre explanations that some Japanese from World War II may have been wandering around the forest that night, hassling people that they ran across.
That's not even clever.
I mean, this was 1964. The war with Japan had long been over.
18 years.
And then they proposed that it was a troop of Boy Scouts or perhaps some soldiers out on maneuvers, and they had all these strange explanations. And then when it was done, after they had gotten the evidence away from him and a map pinpointing the exact location where this occurred, they sent out apparently a group of soldiers who totally cleared out the area and raked it all up to remove all the footprints and all the remaining evidence. If Ruben is with us, he can give us some more info on that part of it. Ruben? He might not be there.
You there, Ruben?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead, Ruben.
Oh, okay. The thing that we found that was very interesting is that these gentlemen were connected with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, That was it's the same base where they have basically done intelligence regarding UFOs ever since 1947. So these guys were connected with the investigation. But as Don had mentioned, how much information he gave them, and then of course, they go out and land on this. They go to the site and found all these evidence that whole site was basically raked clean. And we find this consistent in our research, just like in the Willingham story, where the colonel returns back. He flies over the area, and he could see that entire area was just totally raked clean. Any sort of evidence was completely removed. So the one profound statement that Don shared with me, Jeff, was he said, ask him, well, what do you think? How did you feel about this? What was your final thought? He says, I won. They didn't take me. And that really tells you, though, the whole story of his entire ordeal and what he went through and what he had to do to survive. And the thing that kept him alive was his will to fight, because he had a 1-year-old daughter and he had a young wife, and he decided that that was worth fighting for.
What a story! What a truly amazing story. So it's all developed in the book, of course. RoswellBooks.com is where you can get the book. The idea that he was able to pick up their thinking, I'm wondering if they were telling him, come on down, don't worry, you're going to be fine, and then he was able to read more thoughts than they were maybe anticipating he could read, that included his being dissected and pickled or something. I don't know. This is odd. They wouldn't say, come down, we're going to take you as a sample. That wouldn't make sense. So, yeah, see what the dilemma is here? How do you figure this out?
Yeah. There was something else, too. I know he had mentioned that Don had suffered this post-traumatic stress, and one of the areas in our book describes how he had basically went after this. Whenever he would go camping, I think it was one night that he had seen this object fly over their campsite, and he looked at them. He looked at the object, or this just looked like a shooting star, but he knew it was one of them. He had that sense.
Well, gentlemen, that was absolutely amazing to hear, and I thank you so very much for sharing all that, and I wish you the best of luck with the book. Keep in touch. We'll look forward to having Colonel Willingham back on again with both of you at the right time, hopefully in a couple of months or so. But in the meantime, again, a job extremely well done, guys. Just great.